Like a backstage pass to the world of fly fishing travel, this is Waypoints, the podcast of destination angling. News and events, helpful travel tips, destination profiles, great stories, and expert advice from some of the most seasoned and experienced names in fishing travel. Waypoints is brought to you by Yellow Dog Fly Fishing Adventures, the industry's #1 specialty travel company for the very best insider knowledge, logistical support, and trip preparation. Freshwater or saltwater, international or domestic, Yellow Dog has you covered for your next fishing adventure. And now, your Waypoints host, Yellow Dog founder and director, Jim Klug.
Welcome to Waypoints, the podcast where we explore the people, places, and stories that define the world of fly fishing and destination angling. Today, we're headed to the land of fire and ice, home to some of the most breathtaking fishing landscapes and productive trout and salmon waters on Earth. We're talking, of course, about the country of Iceland, a destination that over the past decade has experienced a rise in angling popularity due to its unparalleled natural beauty, world-class fisheries, and growing accessibility. My guest today is someone who's not only mastered Iceland's waters, but has also revolutionized how anglers from around the world experience the country. Joining us is Kristján Rafnsson, known to many as the Viking. He's the CEO and founder of Fish Partner, Iceland's most established and successful fly fishing outfitter. What started more than a dozen years ago as a side project for Kristján has grown into what today is the foremost fly fishing operation in Iceland. Fish Partner currently leases and manages 18 rivers and more than 40 lakes, offering anglers access to some of Iceland's most exclusive and productive fishing opportunities. With 3 full-service lodges, a selection of self-catering rental houses, and a full range of tailored all-inclusive packages, Fish Partner caters to every type of angler, from those seeking scaled-down, high-value adventures to anglers focused on high-end luxury fishing experiences. Beyond his business acumen, Kristján is a true adventurer. He's fished nearly every stream and lake in Iceland and has traveled the world in search of new fishing experiences. Kristján's passion for fly fishing and his intimate knowledge of Icelandic waters are matched only by his dedication to creating unforgettable experiences for his clients. In this episode, we'll dive into Kristján's journey, the draw of fishing in Iceland, and we'll discuss Fish Partner's growth and success over the past several years. Kristján, welcome to Waypoints, and thanks for joining us today to talk about Iceland. It's great to be able to sit down with you.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited about it.
Absolutely. Well, let's get started with your story, Kristján. How did your journey with Fish Partner begin, and what inspired you to turn what you once described as a side hustle project into Iceland's most successful fly fishing business? Talk to us about your story.
Well, it's a long story. So I was almost born with a fly rod in my hand. I got my first fly rod when I was like 7, 8 years old, and fished very, very hard all my teenage years and until now. I've fished really, really hard, and I've always had some business going on in my life, but I always wanted to have a fishing business, but I just didn't get into it until 13 years ago. So I had a little other business, like a wholesale business, and I started Fish Partner just as a side hustle. So I just got one river, and I was kind of trying to sell it, and it wasn't really successful until I just
went all in.
It went all in.
Yeah.
So I started my first year. I started just going to shows, just as a guest. I did this. Went to Russia. I went to England. I went here to the States.
All the consumer fishing shows.
Yes.
To kind of talk about your offerings.
Exactly. So and then the year after, I started to go to the shows here in the States. And slowly, I managed to get more waters into my hands. So today we have probably around 18 rivers and around 40 lakes in our offers.
That's a big jump from starting at one river back in the early days. That's quite a collection now.
Yeah. It's a quite good portfolio, and we have something for everyone. We have like fully catered packages. We have self-catering packages. We sell like a license. That's mostly locals buy that. So we have a very, very, very big offer of fishing options.
You have a broad range of things that you offer, and I want to get into that and ask you about all those individually. But it's interesting, you talked about when you started going to the shows 10 plus years ago and promoting Iceland. It seems to me that was about the same time that Iceland was kind of starting to hit the radar for a lot of U.S. anglers. No doubt there were a handful of Americans that had already been aware of and had known about the amazing fishing in Iceland prior to that. But in general, it seems like it was about 10 years ago that Iceland kind of started blowing up in the U.S. market. So clearly your timing was really good on that.
Yeah, we've done a lot of marketing in the U.S. especially. Iceland was also always very known for the Atlantic salmon fishing, but people weren't aware of how good the trout fishing was. And I think we can blame it on the Icelanders, because a lot of the Icelanders are only salmon anglers. And some of them, they talk about brown trout like just trash, because they're only fishing for salmon. So, but I fish for everything, and I've just figured out that there's a big market in the U.S. for trout fishing. So.
Well, my first trip over to Iceland was probably about 10 years ago, and that was my takeaway, is that the Icelanders and a lot of the Euros that were coming over there to fish were very focused on Atlantic salmon. That had always kind of been their reason to go to Iceland, or the reason to fish in Iceland. And then the Americans start coming over, and of course Americans love trout, and they particularly love big brown trout. And to your point, a lot of the long time, Iceland anglers that were either coming from Europe or from within Iceland itself were like, we don't really mess with the trout. Americans got over there and were like, holy crap, there's a lot of trout here and they're huge. It's really something special. Yeah. So that kind of blew everybody away. And that's really when it started to blow up, and people figured out that you guys have this incredibly legit trout fishery. I want to get into the details of that, but let me start with a question for those who have never been fishing in Iceland. And they're like, okay, there's trout there, we get it. There's Atlantic salmon there. If I'm going to go somewhere to chase browns, maybe Argentina, maybe Montana, maybe Chile, what is it about Iceland that makes it unique? What's the wow factor for anglers when it comes to the fishing in Iceland? What's the biggest thing that make anglers kind of fall in love with Icelandic waters?
Well, there's not some one wow about it. It's a lot of wows. So first of all, it's all native fish. We don't stock anything. It's all wild, pure, and natural. A lot of our rivers are just crystal clear, so it's a lot of sight fishing. And then, of course, we have another fish from the trout family, the Arctic char. We have a lot of Arctic char. So that's also a wow. And often you can catch them in the same place, in the same pool even. So I don't even know where to begin with the wow, because it's just one big wow, I think.
Well, and of course the scenery and the landscapes. I mean, that is one thing that blew me away. I mean, whether it's the massive waterfalls, just the incredible rugged landscape of which you find yourself fishing in the middle of, the volcanic aspects of the country, the geothermal. I mean, it's a massively popular tourist destination for people that have never even thought about picking up a fly rod. People just love going to Iceland, touring the island, driving around, seeing all the natural wonders that the country has.
Yeah.
But then you add to that all the amazing angling aspects, and it's really, there's no place like it.
No, it's very, very different from other places in the world. And the variety of the fishing is just amazing. For example, there's one lake we have in the Highlands, which is actually called, in my language, Ljótipollur. It means the ugly pit. We call it the volcano lake. So it's actually an old crater. And it's quite easy to get down, but it's harder to get up. But that crater is packed with small brown trout.
Well, another thing that makes Iceland really unique is the way the fishing access is set up throughout the country. And I want to talk a little bit about that because, as I understand it, all of the rivers in Iceland are privately owned or leased. This is a system that's rooted in Icelandic law and tradition. It means that access to fishing any river in Iceland typically requires explicit permission from the owner, or, as is more often the case, the leaseholder, often in the form of a purchased fishing license or permit. So you can't go over to Iceland, rent a car, and just DIY and go to every river like you could, say, in Montana, for example. You have to have permission, and usually it's either by being part of a fishing club that has a lease or several leases on one or more rivers, or, in the case with Fish Partner, a guide service that, as you were saying, you have 18 rivers, you have 40 lakes. People come to you and you've got all of this arranged. So by fishing with your operation, Kristjan, people are going to get access to all these amazing waters.
Yeah, exactly. So all water in Iceland is private. There's no public water, even the lakes. So you always have to buy a permit or a license to fish anywhere. So like I do it, I lease from the landowners. And usually we do like a few-year contract. So I fully control the waters, and we have very, very limited amount of people fishing the waters each day. So it's very private and very exclusive. There's no combat fishing in any pool, never. So if you have this pool, these hours, it's yours. There's no one else.
Yeah, very different from the U.S. West, where, let's say you go to the Madison. Yeah, the fishing is going to be good, but there's going to be a lot of boats, a lot of anglers. You're going to be seeing people throughout the day. When you are on your river for the day, on your section, it's yours. You don't run into anybody else. You know that whether it's a single pool or it's a 2 or 3 mile beat, that's your fishery for the day when you have it.
Exactly. You might run into a sheep, but that's it.
Well, Fish Partner leases and manages an impressive number of rivers and lakes all throughout the country. This is something that has obviously made you guys a key player, really, when it comes to access and being able to offer your clients not just great fishing opportunities, but this amazing amount of diversity, which can change throughout the season, depending, on what your anglers may be looking for, what type of experiences they want. How do you go about choosing which fisheries to include in the Fish Partner portfolio? You mentioned you started with one river back in the day when this thing first launched. Now you have an incredible lineup of different waters. How do you go about kind of researching and selecting these waters to add to the portfolio?
Well, every once in a while, the most famous fisheries are bidden out on the open market. So outfitters like me, they place an offer, and usually the highest offer takes the river. So I take usually part in every bid outs. And often I get what I want if I'm willing to pay enough. But I have also been searching for rivers that are a little bit off the radar, and people don't know about. So that actually has been the most successful part in my company, getting like fisheries that people usually don't know about, but are really good.
And would you have had a chance to go and fish and research some of these when they do come up to bid, or do you just kind of know by reputation they're pretty epic waters?
I've fished almost every river in Iceland, so I know them all.
Well, it's an interesting system because I think a lot of people think it's all privatized. That must make it really rough for being an angler in Iceland. But at the same time, this leasing system really allows the country to maintain sustainability and protect these fish populations, which is one of the reasons the fishing remains so good today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the lakes, little easier to access. You still need a permit to fish them, but not necessarily as difficult to access, say, as some of the rivers, correct?
Yeah. It's usually easier to fish the lakes. You can either just, get a license from a farmer, or we actually have a club, Fish Partner Club, where you pay like $60 and you can fish unlimited as often as you want in about 18 lakes, I think.
Yeah, so if you're local, that's a great fishing option.
Yeah,
you join a club, and then you have access to these waters.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
I mean, it's might not be the same quality as the rivers that we usually fish. But if you just want to go fishing and catch whatever, it's a good option.
Well, on that note, how has the culture of fly fishing evolved in Iceland over the years? From the time you were young and picked up your first fly rod and found your way to the sport, what have you seen over the last few decades as far as kind of the evolution of fly fishing as a sport in Iceland?
Fly fishing has become the most popular fishing method in Iceland. It wasn't like that. About 10 years ago, people started to realize the benefits of the catch and release. So it all used to be catch and kill by the locals, but now most of the best rivers in Iceland are all catch and release. And finally people learned that it actually is working. Now we catch more fish and bigger fish. So that is probably the
biggest evolution.
I think so.
Are Icelanders warming up to brown trout? Are they starting to figure out what a cool quarry it is on a fly rod, that it's worth chasing, or are they still kind of focused more on the salmon?
No, the new generation, the younger anglers, they're all in trout. I mean, they also salmon fish, but the younger generation, they're like nerds, they're tying all their own flies and they trout fish a lot. So,
well, I want to talk more about the species. We've touched on them already, but let's talk about what's available to the angler when you go over. Some rivers have salmon, and obviously you have seasonal runs, certain times of the year when the salmon fishing is going to be at its peak. But healthy stocks of Atlantic salmon, are the stocks still vibrant in Iceland, and are they still good?
I mean, the salmon, the Atlantic salmon is not like it was 20 years ago.
Really, anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world. Yeah. But in Iceland, we still have a very healthy population. So, and fingers crossed that it will keep that way. So,
yeah. And then, of course, the brown trout. And you have your native indigenous river brown trout that, can be massive, like true trophy brown trout. You also have sea run brown trout. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So the sea run browns, we have them in quite many places in Iceland, but all the best sea trout fishing in Iceland is in the south coast. And so there's a big glacial river called the river Skaftá. For some reason, all the best sea trout rivers in Iceland are connected to this big glacial river. So these sea trout are all native, and the seasons, we have two seasons. We have spring season, which is April through May. And then we have the fall season, which starts in August and ends in October 20th. So the fish, they run in the fall. They stay in the river for the whole year. And then they go back out in like late May or June. These fish are pretty amazing. I mean, they've been there for, before the human were there. And the average size of the fish is about 7 pounds. That's a good average size for a trout.
For a sea run.
Yeah, for a sea run. So, but we catch them over 20 pounds, and it's very normal to get like a 12, 15-pound fish.
And you fish for them either in the spring or the fall. Those are designated seasons for the sea runs.
Yes.
And then in other parts of the country, especially up in the north, that's where you have your indigenous browns, which can also be huge.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, and you can fish those throughout the summer season?
Yes. You can fish them from basically throughout the whole season up in the north, starting in April, ending in September. And yes, so the salmon season is starting in June and ending in September. And the char season is usually June, July, early August. These are usually the prime times for the Arctic char. So we actually have prime time throughout the whole season, just with different species in different places.
Talk to us a little bit more about the char fishing, because that's something that's gaining popularity right now in the States. Before, especially over the last 10 years with Iceland, it was all about the browns, going after the browns. Now we're starting to hear more about the char. Other fisheries like Greenland, for example, that has fantastic char fishing, are starting to build in popularity. I think a lot of American anglers are starting to tune into the fact that this is a really cool species. And you guys have a very healthy fishery for char up there.
Oh, yeah, we do. I mean, these fish, they fight very hard. Our char, they usually don't get bigger than 10 pounds. That's like a very, very big char. But where we fish for them, they're usually in the range 2 to 5 pounds. And they're super fun to catch. We catch them dry flies, we catch them on nymphs, and a lot of sight fishing as well. So I love fishing for them. We usually use like 5 or 6 weights.
And they get healthy sizes.
Yeah.
And colorful. A lot of those beautiful, colored up, bright orange char that you see.
Yeah. Actually, and they're different between places. And they are very different from the Greenland char, at least the resident one, because they have all kinds of different colors. We can catch with a yellow belly, orange belly, red belly, pink belly, and they're funny looking fish.
Well, and you were saying that nowadays most all of the sport fishing up there is catch and release. Is that for all the species?
Yeah, depending on the fishery. I mean, we have a lot of lakes who are overpopulated and it's healthy to take out. But all the rivers are mostly catch and release now.
Well, let's get back to the browns, because I know a lot of our listeners have heard a lot about Icelandic brown trout. What is it about your brown trout, especially like in the northern rivers, that makes them so special and different from brown trout found elsewhere in the world? Because they are a different fish, both in their behavior, the way you fish for them. Talk to us a little bit about that. What makes the brown trout fishing in Iceland unique?
Well, like I said before, they're native, and they have they have a lot of spots. They're like leopards. They're just covered in spots, and sometimes you catch a brown trout, and they even have spots on their fins, tails, everywhere. So they are very, very unique,
and fairly aggressive fish.
Yeah, fairly aggressive.
My first trip over there, we were fishing with a young guide. And the water was a little off-colored on a couple of the rivers that we fished. And I remember he pulled out a box. He said, I think we're going to fish some streamers now. And he opened it up and pulled out some very, very small streamers, like some traditional old streamers. And I said to him, well, I brought, a couple boxes of streamers from Montana. What do you think about this? And I opened it up, and it was just massive streamer flies, like Kelly Gallup style flies. And he's like, I don't know, those, and he was a young guide, and he was like, those seem too big. I don't know if the browns will eat them. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, they're brown trout. I think they'll eat them. And sure as could be, I mean, we started fishing the big ugly stuff, and they were just hammering it. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that, a lot of bigger flies are fished today, and a lot of the same techniques that you would fish browns in other parts of the world definitely apply in Iceland. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, a lot of our American clients, they bring their big, ugly stuff with them, and it really works. It really works, because normally we just fish with just small, regular streamers, like hook size 6, maximum 4, usually not bigger than that. 6 to 8, something like that is the most popular size.
So an Icelandic brown sees like a big articulated sex dungeon or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, I'll have that." Yeah, it works.
It works. Yeah.
Well, I know you hate this question. Every guide and outfitter hates this question because it's hard to pin down. But what can anglers expect in terms of kind of the average size for a brown trout caught in the river over there? What's kind of your standard Icelandic brown?
Well, again, it depends on the fishery in the river, but I would say usually it's very standard, 3 to 6 pounds.
Yeah, beautiful fish.
Yeah, beautiful fish.
And then that's in the rivers, but you guys also fish some lakes that produce some absolute donkeys. I mean, some massive brown trout coming out of these lakes.
Yeah, that's another game.
I think that a lot of times when you talk to American anglers, they're like, I'd rather focus on the rivers. I don't really want to fish the lakes. But there are times when the lakes can be super productive. And, if you're going over for a week, something you might want to consider for a day or two, because there can be some big animals that you find in there.
Yeah, you can find some really, really big animals. And I mean, fishing, we normally fish these big fish in lake called Þingvallavatn. And we call them the Ice Age trout. So originally they got stuck in there last Ice Age. So this is the source of all trout in the world. So they feed mostly on Arctic char, and they gain some serious weight. We've caught them over 30 pounds.
Over 30 pounds
Yes,
in the
we
lakes.
caught them in over 30 pounds. So it's it's a huge animal. But again, it's a lot of work. You know, it's you might go there and get skunked. Yeah. It happens often, actually. But when you catch one of these big monsters, it's going to be a fish of a lifetime, and probably biggest trout you've ever caught and will caught.
Yeah, some of the photos I've seen of you holding some of these fish over the years, it's just scary how big some of these fish can be.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to targeting brown trout, and again, let's go back to the rivers. Obviously, we talked about streamers. Streamers are very effective. What other techniques and approaches are most effective? Is there dry fly opportunities or you're nymph fishing for them? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, they're trout. So, of course, there's a lot of dry fly opportunities. It is, but it also depending on the day, on the water, on the season, of course, what techniques you are using. So usually the prime dry fly season is from mid-June and throughout the July. After that, we're more nymphing or streamer fishing. But also in the springtime, then we're just mostly casting streamers.
So from a hatch standpoint, talking entomology, how much of a factor is that in Iceland? Are you oftentimes in the summer months, for example, trying to match a specific mayfly hatch or caddis hatch? Or talk to us a little about the dry fly opportunities up there.
So we have mostly midges there. So usually we are using a lot of black flies, small black, like the black gnat. That's actually usually my first choice. So you don't actually always need to, match the hatch, but it needs to be like something dark, usually.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked earlier, Kristjan, about the different species found in different areas. I want to return to this because let's say I'm going to go to Iceland for a week, and I want a little bit of everything, right? Maybe I want to try salmon fishing for a couple days. I want to go after some of these big browns. Maybe I'll do a lake for a day or two. And you know what? While I'm there, it'd be really cool to catch a char as well. Is that possible, or are you so geographically dispersed where that's hard to do in one trip?
No, actually not. I have a new operation up in the north called Longwale Lodge. And that's one of the few fisheries that you can have all species. You can have a brown trout, you can have a Sheeran brown trout, you can have a char, you can have a Sheeran char, and you can have Atlantic salmon. You can fish all these 5 species in the same river. So I would, if you're going after, the Icelandic Grand Slam, I would always recommend something like that.
And is there a certain time of the year where that's more likely? Is this, a midsummer fishery, or what's the best time if someone is planning a first trip to Iceland and they're really focused on the diversity?
Then I would go in maybe late June and throughout July.
Nice. Well, one thing that Iceland is known for is its incredible water clarity. I mean, you can get big rain events and things can get off colored. But how does the typical clarity of the water factor into fishing for these different species? And does this affect how anglers need to approach their presentations and techniques? Is it, on one end of the spectrum, I guess you'd have like New Zealand, crystal clear water where fish are hyper alert. You certainly get really great clear water situations in Iceland. Talk to us a little bit about presentations and techniques vis-a-vis water clarity.
Well, because of the clarity, of course, the fish can be quite spooked. So you have to kind of tiptoe sometimes to the pool, and always start a little bit further than a little bit further from the fish than you should with normally. So,
how about weather? And this is a question we get all the time about Iceland. And it's a hard one because weather's weather, right? It changes all the time. But if you're thinking about kind of the typical summer season, when a lot of destination anglers will make a trip to Iceland, what should people expect as far as weather and conditions?
Well, that also depends on the season and when you come. If you go like midsummer, let's say June, July, August, it can be like anywhere between high 50s, low 60s, and on a hot day maybe 70. But we can get some pretty strong winds every once in a while. So people have to be prepared for that. So I always tell people, bring your shorts and all your layers. So be prepared for everything.
Could be anything.
Could be anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like going to Alaska in the summer,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it can be cold and stormy and rainy, so you got to prepare for that. You're fishing in waders all day, so bring good waders and, like you said, lots of layers.
Yeah, lots of layers.
That's just smart. Anywhere you're traveling for freshwater fishing, for sure. Let's talk, speaking of waders, talk to me a little bit about tackle and gear as far as bringing equipment. Different species, we know that, but give us kind of a rundown of what people should be bringing with them as far as their overall setup. Start with trout.
For trout, you should bring a 6 and a 7 weight, maybe a 5 weight as well. Floating lines, bring few sets of sink tips, few different sink rates.
For streamer fishing.
For streamer fishing. Leaders, bring anything from maybe 6 to 12 pound leaders. I'm not very good with the axis. I'm more in millimeters.
Yeah, yeah. But anything from like a 1X to 4X, basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, basically, yeah.
And flies. That's a big one, too. I mean, one thing I noticed when I've fished Iceland is that there's a lot of really beautifully tied local patterns, obviously, especially for the salmon. Mm-hmm. But Iceland has kind of its own world of fly patterns and really cool, unique stuff. Do you recommend that people just get flies when they show up, or should they bring what they have from home?
I mean, they can get flies when they show up, but if they like tying, then of course I recommend they tie their own flies. It's always more fun to fish with your own flies. So we have like Copper John. It's very popular. All kinds of rubber legs nymphs. Our streamers are very popular now, like a sonker, conehead sonkers, white ones, black ones. Probably the most popular streamer in Iceland is the Black Ghost, with a sonker strip on it. When it comes to dry flies, that can be, anything like like the black gnat. That's a very, very efficient fly. And just small dark flies. Well, maybe not small. We usually don't fish the tiny stuff in Iceland. We usually don't go further down than 20. So it's mostly like 16, 18 for the dries. And the nymphs are usually, 14, 12, something like that.
Nice. What about other key pieces of equipment? Obviously, waders, bring really good Gore-Tex comfortable waders because you're going to be wearing them all day long.
Exactly.
Wading boots, felt, rubber sole, what's required over there?
Well, it depends what you like. Okay. We don't want people to bring used felts to Iceland. I personally use felts with studs. That helps me anywhere where I go. So I always recommend having studs in your boots because in some of our rivers it's very, very slippery.
Is there a disinfection process that is mandatory if you bring gear into Iceland? Talk to us about that.
Yes, it is mandatory. So you can do it here in the States. You just go to a vet and you have to get a certification. Or you can do it at the airport in Iceland. They do a very bad job. So usually people just walk through. So we just offer free sterilization in our lodges.
But the easiest thing, of course, is if you're going to Iceland for a week, just buy a new pair of felt wading boots, put studs in them, and show up with clean new gear.
Yeah,
because it does matter on that island.
It does matter. It does matter. And anyway, you're gonna use these waders.
Yeah, absolutely.
So doesn't matter.
Well, walk us through a typical day in the life of a guest staying at one of your full-service lodges, Kristjan. Talk to me about what that day is going to look like from a wake-up through fishing through end-of-day process.
So let's just take, it's a little bit different between fisheries, but let's just take the Highland Fishing Lodge. So we have breakfast at 8 o'clock. We head out on the water at 9. You get packed lunch. It's usually maybe a soup, stew, sandwiches, candy, all the good stuff. So we fish throughout the day. We usually fish from 9 to 6, 9 to 7. And then we go back and we have a 3-course meal in the evening. For those who want to fish more after dinner, so the lodge is based just right on a lake, like a glacial estuary lake. We have some creeks coming in, and it's very often packed with Arctic char. So a lot of people, they just walk out from the lodge with a glass of whiskey, cigar, and catch for char. So that's a typical day in the highlands. If I would say a typical day like up in Long Valley Lodge in the north, then we have breakfast at 7:30. We go out for morning session. We come back for lunch, and then we do an evening session. And then a 3-course meal in the evening. So it's a little different between fisheries.
But long days on the water, typically.
Yeah, long days on the water, yeah.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about how you can customize packages. In the beginning of this podcast, you mentioned that you guys have everything from high-end, full-service luxury lodges to kind of more fish-on-your-own type things. But talk to us about the customization of the Fish Partner packages.
Well, we can pretty much customize whatever the client is looking for. So, and also because we have this huge variety of fishing. So sometimes people do like maybe 3 days in the highlands, and then they go to the lake for 2 days, or they stay in a super high-end lodge somewhere else, and we have a helicopter on site to take them out. So even some people, they go for like a few days on full board, and then they want to do some DIY. They want to be all alone in a mountain cabin, without electricity and everything. So we can basically, just whatever you're looking for, we can manage it.
What is the strangest request you've ever accommodated for a trip? Or like the most, you mentioned a helicopter. A lot of people want to fly around, minimize time, but have you ever gotten an over-the-top request that you're like, I think we can do that, but let's give it a try? Anything unusual that comes to mind?
I don't know where to start. Well, I actually did a very, very fun project with the Bentley motors a few years back. So they were shooting advertisement for Bentley Bentayga. It's like a very high-end car, and they asked me if I can, take care of the fishing part. And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So I took them here and there in the highlands. They were, shooting pictures of the car and doing some marketing material. And then the CEO of Bentley was supposed to come and fish the most expensive salmon river in the world, which is called the Laxá in Ásum. Unfortunately, he had to cancel. So they asked me, would you be so kind to be a model for us? We'll pay you. So I got paid for fish in the most expensive salmon river in the world. I had 2 guides, butler, chef, and a private driver in a Bentley. So it was pretty amazing experience.
Like, let's do this again. This is great.
Anytime.
Well, what are the most kind of popular programs or maybe an itinerary you could recommend for someone who wants to do Iceland for the first time? Let's say I want to book a summer trip. I want to come over for a week. What would you recommend as far as a great overall itinerary? What would that include?
There would be 2 options. I would offer the Highlands Fishing Lodge and maybe then 2 days in the lake. Or I would recommend Long Valley Lodge up in the north. And that's also very good for people who want to come take non-fishing companions with them, because we have a lot of activities there. We have a private driver, a private guide. We can set up like a self-drive sightseeing itinerary for those who don't fish, and we have jacuzzi. We have all the good stuff for the wives there, sauna. And also we have all this variety of fish there. We have all the species. So it would be either of these two packages I would recommend for the first time.
Well, you bring up a good point about non-angling activities, because we get a lot of clients that want to book a fishing package in Iceland, but then they want to add on another week to see the island, to drive around. What are some of your favorite non-angling activities or recommendations, like kind of must-see sites in Iceland that if people are going, and again, fishing aside, non-angling things that people absolutely have to experience while they're there?
Well, I always recommend to see the hot springs, and also go take a bath in one of the geothermal hot springs. Or we have, of course, something like man-made, hot springs like the Blue Lagoon and more of that. That's very touristic, but it's fun experience. But I would always recommend waterfalls, geysers, and hot springs.
And there's no shortage of any of those things in Iceland.
No, they're all over the place.
Everywhere.
Yeah, so it's easy.
And along with being a fishing outfitter and a guide service, you guys are also a fully licensed travel agency, so you can very easily assist with adding on a lot of the non-angling sites and activities.
Yeah, correct. We do a lot of those.
Yeah. Well, for American anglers who may be hesitant to make the trip to Iceland, what's your pitch for why Iceland needs to be at the top of the list? If they're like, oh, I get it, I can find trout other places, salmon are hard, I don't know if I want to go do it. What would you tell somebody, or in fact, when you were at a consumer show and people walk up to your booth and they're like, I don't know, maybe Iceland, like why? What's your answer to that?
Well, first of all, it's easy to get there. Second, it's safe. We have big fish, we have crystal clear water, and you're just going to love it.
Yeah, and surprisingly easy to get there. Talk to us a little bit about how you would make the trip to Iceland from the States, for example.
We have a lot of direct flights from most of the big cities in the States. For example, here from New York, it's a 5.5-hour flight. So it's very, very easy to get there.
Straight into Reykjavik?
Straight into Keflavik, which is 35 minutes out of Reykjavik. So it's very easy to get there. We pick you up at the airport. We either drive you to Reykjavik, where you spent the first night, or we take you directly to the lodge. And it's just really easy.
And do you recommend that people check out Reykjavik when they're there, do a night or two there?
Yeah. Also, I usually recommend people to start in Reykjavik, also to get over the jet lag. A lot of times people are very eager to go straight fishing. But, we pick you up at the airport after a long travel. We take you out fishing, and after 2 hours, you just want to go to bed, So always recommend to do the first night in Reykjavik, and also to explore the city.
Yeah. And it's a neat city to explore. It's there's no place like it, for sure. And then you had mentioned earlier, but let's say you're headed up to the lodge in the northern part of the island. You can be picked up and driven to the lodge. You can also arrange helicopters if people want to transfer that way.
Yeah.
So that's pretty easy to do. Well, let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum from the high-end lodges and helicopters. You guys also have what you call your self-catering properties, which is a little bit more of kind of a do-it-yourself type aspect. For anglers that may be on a budget, tell us how that program works.
Well, we have few places. Usually we just book the fishing license and we book the accommodation for them, which is either like, a nice Airbnb house we have or a rough cabin in the highlands. You rent your own car. Has to be a four-wheel drive car. And we provide you with maps and all the information. And usually we recommend you to take a guide at least for the first day. Just to, it's going to save you a lot of time. And so you just have to buy your own groceries, get yourself there, and then just fish on your own.
Yeah, and you've got a number of different operations as far as the kind of self-catering.
Yeah, I got numbers.
You got numbers. Yeah. I love that. Well, let me ask you something completely different, all right, other than the fishing. When you're not running the business, when you're not scouting new waters, when you're not negotiating leases and doing all these things, and when you're not fishing on your own, what are your other interests? What do you like to do? I asked this because I saw on the website that it says you're quite the salsa dancer. Is that true?
I am the only salsa Viking in Iceland.
The salsa Viking.
No, I really enjoy Latin music and I've been dancing now like social dance salsa for about 10 years and I just really enjoy it, especially when I'm traveling. You can always find a social salsa club and just go and get to know new people and have fun. So,
have you been down to Buenos Aires and done it down there?
I'll be there beginning of March.
Nice.
Yeah.
The salsa Viking.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Well, Iceland is known for its pristine environments. Let me ask you a little bit about conservation. How do you, from a business owner and from someone who has, all of these rivers and lakes kind of under your control that you guys lease, how do you ensure that the fisheries you're managing remain sustainable and productive moving forward? Obviously, that has to do with like balancing pressure and number of anglers, but talk to us a little bit about that kind of conservation aspect of your company.
Well, first of all, we do we have exchanged most of our rivers into catch and release. And so just by doing that, we're, protecting the fish. We also log every single fish we catch. So we know exactly the numbers between years. And we can also see, if the fish is growing or what's happening. We also, we tag fish. So when we catch them again, we can, see how fast they're growing. And so on. So we actually put a lot of effort in the conservation and to protect and make sure that it will be healthy fishery for the future.
And I would imagine that's probably part of your pitch when you look at leasing new rivers from the landowners. You talk to them about this and how you guys manage things.
Yeah, exactly. But, talking to an Icelandic farmer and trying to describe the catch and the release thing, they just don't get it, They just laugh. Why would somebody pay for that?
to put the fish back.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, that's a worldwide thing for non-anglers. I think a lot of people think we're all, insane for what we do.
Well, we are insane, but, it's fun.
No question. Well, summarizing all these things that we've talked about, Kristjan, tell us who is right for an Iceland trip. What kind of angler should make the journey to Iceland, spend a week in Iceland, versus, say, going to South America or the U.S. West? Who is right for your fishery?
They're all right.
I love it. So whether you're a first-time angler, you're kind of new to trout fishing, you would be able to find fishing opportunities for those people. Somebody who's, chased trout or salmon all over the world, you're going to find good, challenging, and rewarding opportunities for them. But you're basically saying anybody that can hold a 5, 6, or 7 weight should come to Iceland, and you can get them into fish.
Yeah, exactly. We also get a lot of beginners. We even get people every year that have never held a fly rod before. And our guides are all very knowledgeable and patient, and they just teach them, how to fish and how to cast. So I think Iceland is for anyone, and it's also just the adventure and to be there. It's not all about the fishing.
Yeah, and you guys could do trips of any length. I mean, if somebody is coming through Reykjavik on a business trip, you can arrange day trips. But certainly the week-long packages, especially if you're making the effort to travel all the way to the country, it's something we highly recommend. Check out that diversity, see a lot of different water, chase the different species, and make the most of the incredible country that you guys have.
Exactly.
Yeah, trips of any length, though, for sure. Well, my last question to you, what is next for Fish Partner, Kristjan? Are there any exciting new developments or projects on the horizon that you can share with us?
I always have something cooking, and I'm not going to share it with you. It will be announced.
It will be announced. I love it. You're not going to tip your hand on any of that.
No.
Okay. That's probably wise. Well, we have certainly enjoyed our relationship with Fish Partner. We love working with you guys. Anybody that's interested in researching or planning a trip to Iceland, we encourage you to give Yellow Dog a call. We've got a great program director that can get things started for you. And again, the sheer diversity and number of different opportunities that exist over there make a trip to Iceland well worth it. And I'm sure it's a destination that's just going to continue to grow in popularity for the future. So thank you for sitting down with us. This has been amazing. We love hearing your story, the creation of Fish Partner. Love hearing about your offerings, and appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you so much, and I really enjoy working with Yellow Dog. It's a really good company.
Well,
so
thank you. We appreciate the relationship as well. That is it for this latest episode of Waypoints. Be sure to visit yellowdogflyfishing.com to plan and research travel, source gear, equipment, and flies for your next destination. Be notified of new podcast episodes and stay up to date and dialed in on all the news in travel and destination angling. Join us for our next episode, and remember, life is short, so get out there and see the world. When it's all said and done, no one ever regretted a life of adventure.
This has been another episode of Waypoints, the podcast of fly fishing travel and adventure angling. Waypoints is produced by Brian Gregson, with music provided by the Steep Canyon Rangers. Visit yellowdogflyfishing.com for more destination profiles, travel news, and expert advice, and be sure to join us for our next episode.